Now, I know you guys covered lots of body systems in health class. Did you talk about the lymphatic system? You did? So one that, we're going to sort of briefly mention it. So do you remember when we used that word lymph before?
Yes.
When did we use it? What context did we talk about lymph? Lindsay? What's that? Lymphoma is, a type of disease that affects the lymph and the lymph glands. But we mentioned it in in another body system section. Emily? Yeah, we mentioned lymph when we talked about capillaries. So if you remember that capillary diagram where the blood was flowing to our tissues and we had our body cells, surrounding each body cell is not just air, it's fluid. It's a liquid. It's called lymph. Lymph is another name for body fluid that is in our body. Okay? And lymph surrounds all of our tissue in our body. Okay? And it moves around our body through a special type of vessel called lymph vessels. They're separate from our blood vessels, but they look similar. If you look at this diagram here, these green, those are lymph vessels that sort of go throughout our body, bringing this fluid and moving it around. And along the way, it goes through special parts of the lymphatic system called lymph nodes. Lymph nodes are areas where this fluid gets filtered, where bacteria and substances can be removed from it. So it sort of works together with our immune system. So our immune system helps protect us from pathogens and bacteria, viruses, and so forth. Our lymphatic system helps with that. So it's this series of tubes, okay, that carry lymph fluid. And lymph circulates around our body. Along the way, it picks up unwanted materials, pathogens. And eventually, this lymph fluid, along the way, gets to what we call a lymph node. And the lymph node is where these substances get filtered out. Our lymph nodes trap bacteria and viruses. Have you ever sort of been sick or had a cold and your mother feels the side and like, your glands are swollen? Has anyone ever heard that?
No.
No? Sometimes people say that. They say, we're not really talking about glands. Okay? These are not endocrine glands that they're feeling, you're not sure, or if you've been sick and it might be sore around your neck area. What they're actually feeling are lymph nodes. Because when you're sick, and you have a bacteria or virus in your body, your lymph is picking up these bacteria. As it gets to your lymph nodes, they filter it out. And when you're sick, they swell up because they're working hard. And so you could feel that. Sometimes they might be painful because they're trapping these viruses. Okay. So what is this? So, why can I? Oh. So our lymph nodes are full of special cells called lymphocytes. That's what that says. Full of lymphocytes. Okay, it's spelled like lymph, then O-C-Y-T-E-S. These are special types of white blood cells that help destroy pathogens, bacteria, things like that. We have lymph nodes all scattered throughout our body. They're clustered in our neck area. We have a bunch of lymph nodes in your chest, have them in your armpits, okay? In the groin area. There's lots of these lymph nodes. So as this lymph fluid goes through, these pathogens can be filtered out. And those white blood cells help to destroy those pathogens. Here you see kind of a diagram showing this. So you have the lymph fluid comes into one of these lymph nodes. It's basically an enlargement of the lymph vessel. Inside are these lymphocytes, these cells, that destroy the bacteria. And then the lymph, as it passes through, has been filtered out, been cleaned out of these pathogens. Okay? So those waste. And then our lymphatic system can put some of that fluid back into our circulatory system. Main lymphoid organs, which are filled with lymph tissue, tonsils, lymph nodes, spleen, thymus gland. These are all tissues that are filled with lymph tissue, where there's lots of lymph nodes that help in this process. Now, there is a, sometimes in a person, their lymphatic system can be clogged up. These lymph vessels that bring fluid throughout our body can get clogged. There's several different reasons they can get clogged. One of the most common, especially in Africa and Southeast Asia, is through a parasitic worm. It's a roundworm, a nematode. And this worm can be spread by mosquitoes. When it gets into a person's body, these worms go into the lymphatic system, into those lymph vessels, and that's where they live. And what happens is they can clog up the lymph vessels. And so fluid can't get around our body as well anymore. And it starts to accumulate. Right? It starts to cause swelling, especially in the lower extremities, in the feet, the ankles and calves and thighs. It's called elephantiasis. It's an obstruction, a blockage in these lymphatic vessels. And it can, you don't have it, it's just I want to talk to you about it because it's interesting. So here you have a person. So again, there's a few pictures here that are a little graphic if you don't like, nothing bloody, but swollen limbs if you don't like this stuff. So this person has elephantiasis. So they have it both legs. Obviously it's worse in their right leg. And what happens is the fluid in their body, because it can't be circulated around because their lymphatic system is locked up with these worms, okay, or through other reasons, it starts to swell up. All the tissue becomes enlarged, okay? And so that's, believe it or not one of the most extreme cases. I'll show you some more pictures here in a second of extreme elephantiasis.
Boy, that's nasty.
So again, here you see this person in their right leg, which is kind of covered by their clothing a little bit. It's normal size. And then their whole left leg is completely swollen with this lymphatic fluid. Your skin is pretty stretchable. This is an extreme version. Again, all of this person's legs and thighs are all swollen with that lymphatic tissue. Okay? It can get so extreme a person can no longer walk anymore. Again, that's a super extreme example.
That looks fake.
That's real.
That's fake.
No, that's real.
Did we already learn that?
Yeah, we mentioned it
Yeah, we already.
early in the year when we were talking about parasites. Because there are other reasons, there are other factors that can lead to elephantiasis. One of them is parasitic nematode or worm. All right, let's talk about the digestive system. Okay.
Oh, great.
So the digestive system itself, okay, takes food and breaks it into smaller components. It takes large molecules and chemically breaks them up into simpler molecules. And there's different types of digestion that take place in our bodies. One type is called mechanical digestion, and that's physically breaking up our foods into smaller pieces.
There's a burger right there.
Basically chewing. Okay? If you take a huge bite of this delicious veggie burger, okay?
It's a cheeseburger.
It's a veggie burger.
It's totally
And you take a big bite of this veggie burger, the first steps in digestion are for you to chew it up. It's much easier for the chemicals, the enzymes in our digestive system to work on smaller pieces. It increases the surface area by chewing. And that's why we chew up our food. So you chew up your food, you're mechanically breaking it down into smaller pieces. Then, chemical digestion begins. Chemical digestion is when enzymes in our body cause chemical reactions which break the molecules into smaller pieces. It actually starts in our saliva. So saliva in your mouth, it's not just like water. It has enzymes in it, digestive enzymes. The enzymes in saliva break down starch. So enzymes are specific. One enzyme breaks down certain types of proteins. Another enzyme breaks down starch. Another breaks down fats and so forth. The enzymes that are in our saliva, they break down starch. Okay? And they break starch into simpler molecules such as sugars. Okay? Starch breaks down into simple sugars. In fact, you can notice this. If you ever take like a very starchy food, say some saltine crackers, you put them in your mouth, chew them up, and just let it sit there for a while. Okay? And just let it sit there for a long time. Let your saliva work on digesting that starch. It'll eventually start to taste a little bit sweet. Because what's happening in your saliva, these enzymes are taking a starch molecule, a large molecule, breaking it up into simpler sugars. And you can taste them. These are in our mouth, in our cheeks, below your tongue. We have salivary glands that basically every once in a while spray saliva into our mouth. You may have noticed this if you ever were like reading a book or something and you yawned. If you happen to yawn at the exact time that your salivary glands are spraying saliva into your mouth, you get a little spray of saliva out of your mouth, like onto your book.
Oh my god, I did that one. I yawned and then it went like.
Yeah, that happens all the time. It's like a little spray in there. It's also why your mouth, like if somebody talks about a delicious veggie burger that you're going to eat for lunch and you're hungry, your brain starts. I eat veggie burger. It's fine. If you're going to eat a delicious falafel sandwich, then your brain is sort of getting your digestive system ready and will spray saliva in your mouth, getting you ready to eat this delicious falafel sandwich, and that's why your mouth waters when you're hungry and you're thinking of food.
Is everything vegetables?
Yeah.
How do you
After chewing up your food, after your saliva starts breaking it down, the next step along the digestive system is to swallow the food. Swallowing food brings it through what we call our esophagus. Okay? The esophagus is basically a muscular tube in the back of your mouth. Starts at the back of your mouth and leads into your stomach. Okay? It's about 25 centimeters long or so. And the food doesn't like just drop into your stomach due to gravity. It's not like, well, your esophagus actually has rings of muscle around it. And they contract one after the other, and it squeezes the food that you swallow into your stomach. It's kind of like if you have a tube of toothpaste and you squeeze one end to the other and you squeeze out the toothpaste. That's how you swallow. Okay, your muscles in your esophagus contract one after the other and squeeze it into your stomach. That's why you can drink upside down because of that process. It's called peristalsis. Yeah, you could drink a glass of water. If you had like a straw and you were standing on your head, you could drink your water, you could swallow it, it'll still get to your stomach. Because again, it's not gravity, it's these muscles pushing it upward. So that process of those muscles contracting one after the other is called peristalsis. That leads to our stomach. So the esophagus basically just pushes this food into our stomach. Our stomach is sort of a muscular sort of bag that holds the food for a little while after we swallow it. And in the stomach is where strong acids are produced to help with the breakdown of the food. These acids help to chemically digest the foods that we eat. Here's where your stomach is. It's sort of on your left side. And the food stays in your stomach for a while. Your stomach kind of churns. You know, if you hear your stomach like gurgling, because there's liquid in there, and as it moves, things move around, you can sometimes hear it. moves around the food that you've eaten, mixes it with this hydrochloric acid and with enzymes to help with the digestion process. Now, hydrochloric acid is a strong acid. Our stomachs have a lining that helps protect them because this hydrochloric acid would damage most of our body tissue. But our stomachs have a special lining, special mucus that helps prevent that. Okay, and that food turns into this soupy kind of mixture called chyme. And the longer the food sits in the stomach, the more liquefied it becomes. And you may have noticed this, if you ever had like the stomach bug or something, that if you vomit soon after eating your foods, they're still maybe somewhat recognizable.
Yep.
However, if it's been a couple hours since you've eaten, a few hours, then it just looks like a puddle of mush and liquid, okay, because it's been digested.
It's beautiful.
And in vomiting, this peristalsis of squeezing food into your stomach is working in reverse. And it's squeezing the food that was in your stomach up, back, through your esophagus, and out. Yeah, that's the mixing of that fluid.
Wait, why do you?
So why do you vomit? Like what's the point of it? It is actually an adaptation. It's a helpful bodily function.
In what way?
That's what I'm asking you. So what would the benefit of vomiting be? Yeah, so we vomit for several reasons. If we are sick and we may have ingested some sort of pathogen, some sort of bacteria, vomiting is our body's way of helping to get rid of it. Okay? Vomiting also gets rid of food so that the energy that would have been used in digestion and moving that along can be used to help us fight off that pathogen. We also sometimes vomit in response to smells. Again, it's a protective adaptation because things that make us like gag in terms of the smell, okay, things like feces or vomit, those are things that could be dangerous for us, right? They could carry parasites, it could carry bacteria. And so when you smell something bad like that, rotting flesh, okay, it's our body's way of keeping us away from that makes it unpleasant because there's a possibility that something dangerous would be in that. All right. Now, as food's moving through our digestive system along the way, there's some other organs. The food doesn't go through the liver or the gallbladder or the pancreas, but they're sort of accessory organs. They add to the digestive juices and enzymes that we're using. The liver produces a special, I guess we'll stop with the intestine next. The intestine is where food goes after it leaves the stomach. The intestine is a long, wound up tube inside of our abdomen. Now, the intestine, it's called the small intestine, but it's actually quite long. This is pretty close to scale. So your small intestine is wound up inside your abdomen. If you took out my small intestine, you could stretch it almost probably from here to the back of the room. Okay, my intestine.
Can we do that?
No, probably not today, maybe another time. So my intestine's all wound throughout the abdomen, so the food as it travels through there can continue to be digested. So it's called the small intestine because it's relatively narrow, not because it's short. It's actually very long. And as the food's moving through our small intestine, this long journey of 25 feet, digestion continues. It's continually broken down. And this is where we start to absorb the nutrients from our food, the valuable things that are the results of digestion. Sugars, proteins, amino acids, okay? That stuff gets absorbed into our blood as it moves through the small intestine. Most digestion actually occurs in the small intestine. So the majority starts in the stomach, but most happens as it's moving along that small intestine. along the way, the liver is working. The liver produces something called bile. Bile is responsible for breaking down fat, digesting fat. The liver also helps to clean our blood and remove toxins and so forth. It's not really a digestive function.
Why do people eat that?
Excuse me?
Why do people eat that?
What?
Liver.
Eat liver?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Some people do eat. Even when I did eat meat when I was a kid, my grandfather, like, twice made me try liver because he liked liver and onions. I know, it's disgusting. So the liver makes bile, this substance that will break down fat, but actually it sends it to be stored in an organ called the gallbladder. The gallbladder is kind of tucked underneath the liver, and it stores up the bile until it's needed. And once it's ready, it squirts that bile into the small intestine through this bile duct. So the liver makes the bile, but it's stored up. The person eats. The gallbladder squirts this bile into the small intestine. Yeah, what were you asking, Kate?
Like my dad had like gallbladder surgery.
Yeah, my wife also had gallbladder. She had her gallbladder removed.
Yeah.
Some people have problems with their gallbladder. It can become inflamed and very painful. Secretions can form in there, gallstones, which as they move through the bile duct become very painful and clog it up. So you can survive and live just fine without your gallbladder. Basically, like when my wife had gallbladder surgery, doctor used arthroscopic surgery, those tools, those long pointy tools, to remove it, and it cut her open to do it. And basically they remove your gallbladder. You still make bile. Your liver still makes the bile. It just goes directly through the bile duct into your small intestine. It doesn't have a storage area anymore. It's no big deal. You can live just fine without it. The last accessory organ here, the pancreas. The pancreas produces what's called pancreatic juices. And these are a mixture of enzymes that help with digestion. And they squirt these pancreatic juices into the small intestine to help with digestion. Birth? Yeah, it can become inflamed and that. And also, as we just talked about, pancreas also creates insulin. It's not really a digestive function, but it's a function of pancreas.
Is this it? Yeah, I'm out of room.
That's what the pancreas looks like.
No, I'm not.
From there, food moves into our small intestine. Now, the inside of the small intestine, it's not just like a smooth tube. It's not like a hose inside. It actually has all of these bumps, all of these ridges. They're called villi. They're these tiny, they're like fingers poking up from the lining of the small intestine. And what they do is they serve to increase the surface area of the small intestine, because that's where nutrients are absorbed. As this digested food is moving through the small intestine, it passes over these villi. Inside of them, what you see here, they're blood vessels. And so this is where nutrients from the digested food diffuse into our blood through those blood vessels to be delivered throughout our body. And finally, our last organ for following the path of food is the large intestine. It's called the large intestine because it's wider in diameter. It's actually shorter than the small intestine. So the food winds around through the small intestine, and then comes into the large intestine. Okay? Sometimes called the colon. This is the ascending colon. Goes up the left side of our body, and the right side of our body, goes across our abdomen, transverse colon, then comes down the left side, and then out of our body. Okay? Yeah, that's where nutrients are stored. Sorry. The job of the large intestine is actually not for digestion. By the time this digested food gets to the large intestine, no more digestion happens. It's fully digested. It's a very, very simple molecule. Basically, almost anything of value has been absorbed into our blood, except for one thing. As this digested material gets into our intestine removes water from it. And so our large intestine reabsorbs water so we can use it. So there's no digestion there. I'll tell you right now, there will be a question on a quiz at some point. It's going to say, what's the last organ in the digestive system where digestion happens? And many of you are going to choose large intestine, but that's an incorrect answer.
It is?
It is. No digestion takes place in the large intestine. The last place digestion takes place in the small intestine. It's fully digested by the time it gets to the large intestine. So the large intestine reabsorbs the water, and what you're left with is undigested material. Stuff that our body couldn't break down. What do we call that? Waste, feces. Okay, may call it other things, but we'll stop there with feces. And we'll talk tomorrow, we'll label the diagram, but now you know the functions of the various digestive organs.